The dispute of genetically modified crops. For the past 20 years, genetically modified crops have drastically increased in popularity. This optimizes agricultural performance by taking DNA from one organism and placing it into another. This synthetic farming tactic can help create resistance to certain conditions such as disease and increased crop yields. This graph from the USDA describes how the U.S. has adopted genetically modified crops. As seen here in 1996, well less than 25% of corn, cotton, and soybeans were planted in the U.S. As of 2018, the percentage of planted acres across the U.S. drastically increased to over 75%. With such growing popularity, one would think that genetic engineering is a well understood topic. Although, in the public and government, this is not often the case, and common misconceptions are held. There are three main regulatory agencies that control GMOs. The first is the Environmental Protection Agency. They handle biopesticides and toxins and regulate them based on how harmful they are to the environment. Then there is the Food and Drug Administration and regulate GMOs based off their harm to the consumption for both humans and animals. Lastly, there's the United States Department of Agriculture, and they regulate the movement of GMOs, including test trials and importation or trading from country to country. Today we will focus on the FDA and EPA. John Davis, former research director of the French National Institute for Agricultural Research, describes their flaws. He explains, scientific understanding of GMOs has changed, and these regulations are now not only unfit for their original purpose, but the purpose itself is no longer scientifically valid. There are numerous pressing areas where regulations are unfit. These include labeling, company ownership, and environmental concerns. It is vital that they become sustainable due to their worldwide prevalence. According to the Center for Food and Safety, 75% of food in U.S. markets contain GM ingredients. Continuing, 92% of corn and 94% of soybeans are genetically modified. This popularity leaves no room for flaw in the nationwide regulations.
This information has led us to defining our problem as a lack of U.S. regulations for GM crops are impeding their sustainability. Our three solutions for this problem take into account newer and better labeling, Monsanto's monopoly, and pesticide drift. Consumer education on GMOs in food has become a major topic of debate. In fact, USA Today reporter Patty Zarling notes that in a 2018 study done by the Hartman Group, nearly half of the participants said they would avoid buying food with GMOs, and a third said they don't want to support companies that use GMOs in their products. When the Hartman Group asked about GMOs 11 years prior, just 15% of those surveyed said they'd avoid them. According to a survey by Consumer Reports in 2014, it was found that 72% of adults explicitly avoid purchasing foods with genetically engineered ingredients. Along with this, 92% of consumers want genetically modified food to be labeled before it is sold and meet government safety standards. With this, the Cornucopia Institute also states that in a poll of about 2,000 adults in 2016, 75% are in support of GMO labeling legislation in general, and 78% mandated that this labeling legislation is on the federal level. In conjunction to this, 80% agree that there should be completely mandatory GMO labeling, as consumers, quote, have a right to know what is in their food or whether it has been altered or changed in some way that is not natural and could impact consumer health, end quote. We can deduce from these results that the vast majority of consumers are in favor of better GM labeling. However, the limitations and implications of the solution may be major. The biggest one is a lack of suggestions regarding implementation of better GM labeling. Along with this, we find that the surveys of consumers were rather small and the surveys were not conducted very recently.
So our second solution is about the Monsanto monopoly and passing a bill in order to end the Monsanto monopoly and encourage organic farmers to pop up again. So an attempt at this bill was tried by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who introduced an 18-month moratorium on large agribusiness such as Monsanto to try to update our antitrust laws in order to better protect America's farmers and consumers. from being harmed by the ever-increasing levels of corporate concentration. So, Representative Mark Hogan from Wisconsin argues that, quote, "Today, corporate profits are soaring, but many middle-class families and farmers continue to struggle. We need this bill so our food is safe again," end quote. So the pros of this is that it creates a more competitive market, which means prices are lower and production is higher because there is no monopoly to control the price of the crops. And some cons of this solution is that suspending Monsanto can bring about a multitude of problems because the amount of food that they provide in our daily lives because of their GMOs is very prevalent. And some implications is that the seed market becomes more competitive with more farms popping up, especially organic farms, meaning that farms are not forced to buy Monsanto's crops. And some limitations is that passing a large and effectual bills might scare Congress members just because of the impact it could have on the economy. So this slide shows how much, like, the importance of the monopoly of Monsanto, with 91% of being controlled by Monsanto for soybeans. Now, the third solution is EPA reducing pesticide drift of farms by placing sanctions on the amount of pesticides and herbicides a farm can spray annually. So current laws is that farmers are liable for their pesticide drift, and the affected area can file a lawsuit against the farmer who sprayed. And although this helps, pesticide drifting is still occurring, and so more strict. The EPA needs to be more strict on monitoring these level of pesticides. And this quote is from the EPA site. Quote, "EPA establishes tolerances, maximum legally permissible levels for pesticide use on farms." Now, the pros of this solution is that it would decrease the cross-contamination and crop injury, which leads to less effect on the environment and a cleaner environment. However, some cons is that it is nearly impossible to stop the surrounding ecosystems from being affected by this pesticide drift. And some implications is that Peter Barfoot and Graham Books, founders of PG Economics, say that GMOs make less spraying, and quote, "In 2015, 11.9 million cars were removed, equivalent on the environment." So a limitation is that the EPA needs a better system to monitor pesticide use of energy farm, which we do not have the technology for that yet, and to track all the pesticide that's sprayed by the farmers. And the farmers' counter argument is that they might not make enough food production because their crops might die because of pesticide use. And Oregon State researchers reported on this fact about the EPA, saying that 70 million pounds of pesticides are lost to drifting.
Out of all the solutions, labeling GMOs was the most pressing and realistic. It gives the consumer a choice. Kathleen M. Zellman, an American nutritionist and dietitian who's the director of nutrition from WebMD, states, quote, "If you learn more about the influences of your choices, you may be better able to control what you eat each day." Food labels allow people to learn more about their choices, in turn allowing them to make better decisions when it comes to food. Secondly, giving people more of a choice rather than eliminating genetically modified crops, or even putting legislation on the crops, is a much better choice for the economy. Purdue University completed a study about what a ban on GMOs would look like. They discovered that yields would go down, while land needs, greenhouse gas emissions, and food prices would all go up. All of this is extremely negative, unlike the effects of better labeling. However, although there are many upsides of better labeling compared to the other solutions, there are still some limitations. Many large conglomerates intentionally avoid the term GMO when labeling the product. Too many, due to the overall power of companies like Bayer hold in the United States economy, it would be very hard to pass fair labeling laws within the next few years. However, according to Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the New York Times best-selling author Amy Harmon, the United States Department of Agriculture has proposed new guidelines for labeling foods that contain genetically modified ingredients. Food makers will be required by federal law to use these labels starting in 2020. These new laws created by the United States Department of Agriculture proved passing laws for better labeling is a great solution supported by many.
Nice job, guys.